Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents Good Spin by Mccallan, narrated by Lori Prinz. Chapter 1. Can I ask you a question? The words rolled out slowly as Emery tried not to give anything away. She needed to suss out Jordan's mental state before she laid her cards on the table. Jordan shifted her feet beneath her on the sofa and brushed an errant piece of hair away from her face. She stopped her ice cream-laden spoon midair without speaking, surveying Emery with dark, unblinking eyes. The woman who sat across from Emery, like everything else in Jordan's apartment, oozed personality. From the hair to the artwork to her strangely specific taste in ice cream, mint chocolate chip with strawberry syrup. Is that a yes? Emery sat up straighter, but tried not to fidget. She stared off toward one of the paintings in the living room, an abstract piece Jordan had completed a few months ago. The bright, chaotic colors made Emery dizzy if she studied them for too long. Jordan's necklaces jangled as she shook her head back and forth and eyed Emery with suspicion. Why are you acting so weird? Hey! Emery pushed her foot into the arch of Jordan's heel. Jordan's movements stilled, and she looked over expectantly. I thought I was asking the questions here. Jordan shrugged her shoulders with a casualness Emery envied. You're sure taking your sweet time. What do you need? Why was this so hard? Working in public relations, she spent her days dealing with far bigger problems. Why was asking Jordan so difficult? Probably because Jordan had a whimsical air about her. But she was one of the most consistent and steadfast people Emery had ever met. She'd been pulled into Jordan's orbit immediately, strangely unable to contain her curiosity. She'd seen her around the apartment complex a few times before then, all smiles and a confidence that radiated from her. People like Jordan tended to make Emery uneasy, and in her experience, they used brightness to distract from a darkness they didn't want people to see. But as she'd learned over the past year, that bias was completely untrue where Jordan was concerned. And Emery was glad she hadn't decided to keep her distance. Emery had met her as Jordan was coming back from a lunch run, paint splattered across her clothing, her hair tied in a messy bun. A red ombre at the time, instead of the current purple. But she had a calmness, like she was exactly where she was meant to be at any given time. Emery had envied that from their first official meeting. Jordan's chaotic energy always tempered by an unevenness running below the surface. Her carefree nature possible because she always seemed to be in control of the choices she made. I need a favor. Emery let the words hang between them. A huge favor, but maybe beneficial to both of them in the end. She hoped. What's that? Jordan responded, finally scooping the ice cream into her mouth before small droplets spilled onto her folded leg and the sofa underneath her. She pushed the words out quickly before she choked on them. I want you to come with me to the wedding in Hawaii I've been talking about. Jordan swallowed her ice cream and sat quietly for a moment. Her eyes darted across Emery's face, rooted in place with Jordan's focused stare. What do you mean, with you? Jordan asked, enunciating the last few words. Emery faltered for the first time since the exchange began. Was she really going to do this? To ask Jordan to do this with her? The idea hadn't seemed so crazy this morning when she'd woken up with it lodged in her brain. But now, under Jordan's stare, she considered the implications for the first time. Can't one friend give another friend an all-expenses-paid trip to Hawaii for a week? 8 days, Jordan corrected her. Emery's brow drew upward in surprise that Jordan had been paying such close attention the few times she'd mentioned it. She ignored the small flip in her stomach and focused on the task at hand. So, now we're haggling over the length of the trip? I think if it were that simple, everyone would be looking for more friends like you. What's the catch? Jordan stood up and wandered over to the kitchen and grabbed the rest of the ice cream out of the freezer. She kicked the door shut with her bare foot and placed the almost empty container on the island in front of her. She flexed her palms down on the hard counter and spread her athletic frame wide as she rolled her shoulders. Her loose tank top hung across one shoulder, part of her tanned clavicle exposed and flexing as her hands pushed into the granite beneath them. Emery followed Jordan's movements with her eyes, struck by how comfortable Jordan always seemed, her long arms slightly bent at the crook of her elbows as her fingers tapped errantly. Jordan's temperament was so different from her own, her brown eyes soft yet perceptive, like she saw everything but never let it frustrate her. She stared at Jordan for a beat longer before she spoke. Well, the way I see it, you could use a vacation after getting dumped, and I need a date to the wedding. The physical distance between them made it easier for Emery to articulate what sounded stranger by the moment. She'd made a mistake by not practicing the words out loud beforehand like she did with press releases. The magnitude of the request hit her squarely in the gut as each word slipped out of her lips for the first time. Jordan scooped more ice cream into her bowl and haphazardly drizzled strawberry syrup across the top. Damn, she was making Emery work for every word right now. Not that Emery blamed her. As the words tumbled out, she became less certain with each passing moment. That's kinda harsh, Jordan lamented before quickly bouncing back. And I didn't get dumped. We decided to go our separate ways. For someone asking for a favor, you could have a little more tact. She pointed her spoon at Emery like a wand and flicked it around with her wrist. Jordan and her now ex-girlfriend, Alicia, had already been dating when Emery had moved into the apartment complex a year ago. Although she'd known them for the same amount of time, she'd never especially liked Alicia. And she'd gotten the sense Alicia didn't like her, although she'd always tried to be friendly and congenial during the brief times they engaged with one another. Jordan was a great person, and Emery had played nice with people she liked far less to ensure the few relationships she had didn't suffer. She chalked up dealing with Alicia to the cost of keeping Jordan in her life, a worthwhile trade-off. She was surprised when Jordan had told her they'd broken up, although strangely relieved. Another thought she pushed away when it flitted through her mind. Nothing had really changed for Emery after the split, except she didn't need to text anymore before she showed up with coffee in case Alicia had slept over. Emery's shoulders hunched before she stood up and walked to the opposite side of the kitchen island. She placed her own palms down on the counter and mirrored Jordan's previous position. I'm sorry. That was thoughtlessly cruel. I know you've been going through a tough time. I think it could do us both some good. Jordan lifted a sculpted eyebrow so high it almost disappeared behind her sideswept bang. And what's the good in this for you? Having your gorgeous mug around. Emery's voice was light as a lopsided grin formed on her face. Good try. At least don't insult my intelligence. We may not all be college-educated, but I'm smart enough to know you're being evasive. That's not what I was saying. Spit it out already, then. Emery squirmed with the intense stare leveled in her direction, and she said the words before she lost her nerve. I want you to pretend to be my girlfriend at the wedding. Excuse me? A look settled across Jordan's symmetrical face that she couldn't decipher. Emery willed herself to push forward. I wouldn't have asked if you and Alicia were still dating because that would be weird, but now that you aren't, it seemed like a better idea. That's the weird part of this request? I'm actually single now? Emery let out an exasperated sigh and ran her hand through her hair. Look, I get it. But I was thinking a nice post-breakup vacation could be just what the doctor ordered for you. You called it a favor, though, which means you should be getting more out of it than I am. What might that be? Because lesbian bed death is real. We could be in one of those loveless relationships where we don't even have sex. Emery blushed, her skin hot and itchy under Jordan's stare. That's not what I'd be getting out of it. Do you write mystery novels or something? You're really keeping this going. Jesus Christ, Jordan, you're making me regret this with each passing second. She smirked. Wow, it's like we're already in a real relationship. I haven't come out to anyone yet. Emery's face turned a deeper shade of red than it had been moments ago, and she stared down at the tiny flecks in the granite countertop. Jordan's movements stilled as she stared across the counter with wide, unblinking eyes. What? I haven't come out to any of my college friends yet. I know I should have, but there was never a right time. Emery took a deep breath and continued. And I haven't seen them in a while. I kept telling myself I'd do it in person, but we haven't all met up together in years. Since college, actually. I don't want to go to the wedding and pretend I'm straight, or have to have a conversation with everyone individually or whatever. If I bring a girlfriend, I don't have to play 20 questions. But you don't have a girlfriend. Jordan gave her a cheeky grin. Emery rolled her eyes and pointed back and forth between them, which is the entire reason this conversation is happening. So... Jordan twirled her spoon around the bowl, dragging the moment out. You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend to save you from coming out to everyone? Emery huffed and ran her fingers through her hair. When you say it like that, it sounds immature. And how would you say it? Jordan's lips twitched back and forth in amusement as she waited for an answer. Emery chewed on the inside of her lip thoughtfully. I'm asking you to support a friend as she navigates the complexities of a nuanced situation. Jordan let out a low whistle. Shit. No wonder they pay you so much to do good PR spin. Spin is inherently favorable. You don't really need to say good. Emery answered through gritted teeth. You sound like an ass when you say things like that, Jordan chirped back, shaking her spoon in Emery's general direction. Emery's face softened. I know. I'm sorry. This is stressful for me. Stressful was an understatement. She felt the stress through the tips of her toes and in every strand of her hair on her head. It was the kind of stress that kept her up at night, tossing and turning until her sheets were nothing but a rumpled mess beneath her sweaty and frazzled body. She'd wake up with a few blissful moments of reprieve, only to remember the impending wedding and be confronted with her feelings about it. Why did it have to be so hard? So many people came out. Hell, she'd already come out to people in Austin. There was something about telling her friends that she couldn't quite wrap her head around, couldn't force the words out, even through a text message. Her roommates, her confidants, the people who shaped her drunken nights and hungover mornings. More than anything, she hated her weakness. She hated that she wasn't braver and that she gave a fuck about people's opinions of her. Jordan put down the spoon she'd been holding and walked around to Emery, who was now wide-eyed and taking in rapid breaths. And you haven't found a better spin for this? Jordan teased, unaware of the war raging inside Emery's mind. It's really what you think makes sense? Emery thought about it for a beat, willing her body to return to a status where she could think clearly, and the blood wasn't rushing through her brain like a tiny orchestra had taken up residence between her ears. It wasn't her best idea, but it wasn't her worst by any stretch of the imagination. Having a fake girlfriend was efficient. She wouldn't have to tell everyone she was a lesbian, and she'd get to spend a week, 8 days, she reminded herself when she thought about Jordan's smug words, on a beautiful island with her closest friend. What could possibly go wrong? I'm not thinking very clearly about anything right now, but I know we'd have a blast in Hawaii together. She paused for a moment and struggled to regain her composure, her fingers fidgeting awkwardly at her sides. And I know you've become my best friend over this past year, and you'd make me proud to be your fake girlfriend. Jordan laughed and moved in for a hug. Their bodies connected for a few seconds before Jordan shifted backward, her long limbs looping gently around Emery's hips. Jordan pouted, and Emery worried for a second she was going to say no. I want to go snorkeling and cliff diving. Is that a yes? The hopefulness in Emery's voice bordered on embarrassing. She bounced from her heels to the balls of her feet and tried to restrain her excitement. Convincing Jordan was easier than expected, and it was hard to imagine the plan had come together without more begging. Jordan was definitely the go-with-the-flow type, but the ease with which Jordan's agreement happened surprised her. It's a yes, Jordan answered with an infectious smile. All I ask is that you're honest with me. This is a complicated situation, and I want to know what I'm dealing with. Emery's eyes faltered with the request, but she plastered on a smile. You're the best, she squealed, enveloping Jordan into another tight hug. I will buy you all the ice cream and take you on all the snorkeling trips your heart can handle. Emery was as honest with Jordan as she was with herself. That counted, right? Jordan pulled her body back slightly and lifted an eyebrow. I said cliff diving, too. Emery let out a high, nervous laugh. Yeah, we'll talk about that one. Jordan crawled from her bed as the knocking at her front door continued. She didn't need to check her phone to know that it was early. Too early for unscheduled visits, unless it was Publishers Clearinghouse to tell her she was now a millionaire. Was that even still a thing? She'd remembered the commercials as a kid, but she hadn't had cable television in a decade. She worked to shake the thoughts of her childhood away as she padded through the living room in her boy shorts and a tank top. Hopefully, they'd let her change before the photo op. What? She snapped as she swung the door open, bleary-eyed and less chipper than normal. She'd slept surprisingly poorly last night, but the day had decided to move forward whether she was a willing participant or not. I made coffee. Emery stood on the other side, fidgeting back and forth with 2 mugs perched precariously in her hands. What time is it? Jordan eyed her next-door neighbor and, apparently, fake girlfriend. Emery was annoyingly bubbly this morning, her blonde hair in a high ponytail, dressed casually for the day in a pair of dark, tapered jeans and a simple green tank top. Much less buttoned up than her typical blazers and slacks. But Emery looked perfect in whatever she wore, and Jordan couldn't help but give her a once-over that she worked to temper quickly. Emery didn't seem to notice, lost in her own thoughts. It's 8. I wanted to chat since we're only about a week away from leaving. Should I be expecting you to slip an itinerary under my door or something? I didn't think there'd be that much to process. I'm starting to feel like we're actually in a relationship. Jordan put her forearm against the doorframe and leaned her head against it, sighing dramatically. Emery scoffed and moved by her into the apartment, their bodies brushing slightly. Jordan shifted closer to the door to let her pass. I've never done anything half-assed, and I'm not about to start with this, Emery said as she placed the cups on the counter. But we talked about it yesterday, and the day before that when you first asked me. What else do you possibly need to tell me that we can't sort out on an 11-hour flight? Your outfit for the wedding. Emery seated herself at the kitchen island, an imperceptible look in her eye that didn't bode well for Jordan's sanity. Jordan took a sip of her still hot coffee and began to come to life. Exactly how she liked it. Black with a dash of cream and sugar. Emery sure had some facets of this whole fake girlfriend thing down. Jordan took another quick sip of coffee, her eyes darting away from Emery. "What about my outfit for the wedding?" Emery ran her hands down the front of her shirt like she was working out the wrinkles. But Emery's clothing didn't have wrinkles. Ever. "I wanted to know what you planned on wearing." Jordan smiled and took another sip of coffee before speaking. "A bikini. Maybe a pair of short shorts over it if there's a light breeze on the beach." "What?" Was that a blush on Emery's face? Her eyes were wide and a deeper blue than usual in contrast to the heat fanning wild across her cheeks. The coffee cup she'd picked up stilled, frozen halfway between the counter and her mouth. "Oh my God, calm down. I have an entire closet full of clothes." Jordan couldn't help but flash a wicked grin. "Unless you wanted to match for your coming out party, how very junior prom of you." She laughed and rolled her shoulders. Emery had put her through the ringer these last few days, and she needed to get some amusement out of the situation. "That's not funny." Emery leveled a stare at Jordan she knew was meant to intimidate. A stare she'd seen Emery use once on coworkers when she'd visited her downtown office to pick her up for lunch. Strangely, as she considered it, one of the only times they'd hung out outside of their apartments. "Anything can be funny if you laugh at it." Jordan worked to keep the conversation light, surprised at Emery's coldness. "Well, I don't find it funny." Emery's controlled veneer faltered for a moment as discomfort flashed across her face. She didn't love Emery's behavior right now, but she knew coming out could be hard, and the look in Emery's eyes reminded her of a scared, wounded animal trying to protect itself. It's going to be okay. We're already friends. I know about your life." She paused and took another sip of coffee. "No one is going to doubt us," she continued reassuringly, flashing a broad smile she'd been told before could melt even the coldest hearts. "I'm starting to think this was a bad idea." Emery picked at the countertop with a short, well-manicured fingernail. It had no impact on the smooth granite, but she seemed to find comfort in the act. It was a strange proposition, but the more days that had gone by, the more Jordan grew excited for the trip. Spending a week in Hawaii with a beautiful woman and pretending to be in love wasn't the worst hardship. It wasn't in her best interest to push Emery, who was clearly more fragile about the whole situation than she'd let on, to think it was a bad idea. "Do you want to go dress shopping today, Em?" Emery shifted her gaze from her focus on the countertop. A smile worked its way across her lips that made Jordan's heart soften with its sincerity. "I thought you'd never ask." Less than an hour later, they strolled down the streets of Austin, checking out a few of the local boutiques. Emery was quiet and contemplative as they walked. "Cat got your tongue?" Jordan gently prodded her with an elbow as they turned into a store. "I'm feeling a little overwhelmed." "I find that hard to believe given how much planning you've already managed to execute in the last few days. What are you overwhelmed about?" "I don't want to do it. I don't want to tell people. I just want to live my life." Emery was always forthright, but she'd never been especially emotionally expressive, choosing to spend her time discussing things and abstract ideas instead of feelings. It was something Jordan had found surprising about her when they'd first met. A lot going on below the surface Emery obviously didn't want to share. Jordan paused. It was a fair statement, and she worked to choose her next words carefully. "Then why go through all of this?" "I mean, how can I not tell them?" Emery stared at a shirt on a mannequin and refused to look at Jordan. "You work with people every day who pay you a lot of money to keep their private lives and public lives separate. I wouldn't fault you for wanting to do the same." Jordan didn't quite get the sentiment, but she was trying to throw Emery a lifeline she seemed to desperately need and yet intended to reject. "But these people are part of my private life, the life I'm supposed to live unabashedly and honestly. I'm never going to send a memo out about my shit at work, but my friends, the people I spent years with, it feels weird not to tell them." Emery brushed her fingers along a rack of dresses hanging on the wall, the bright prints popping against the muted backdrop of the store. "Are you worried they won't accept you?" Jordan asked, her brow furrowing. She hadn't considered the idea until this moment. "Because if they don't, they were never your friends to begin with." "No, it's not that." Emery moved to another row so Jordan couldn't see her anymore. "I used to talk a big game. I don't want them to know how wrong I was." Jordan popped her head around the rack. "Talk a big game about what?" Emery grimaced. "About having it figured out. About knowing exactly what I was doing with my life. About being in control." Jordan gave her a perplexed look. "But you're still in control." Emery let out a sigh Jordan found slightly annoying, like she was going to have to explain something to a small child. "It's not that simple." "I don't understand." She wasn't trying to be difficult, and she knew the coming out process was different for everyone, but it felt like there was more than Emery was letting on. She decided to change the subject for both their sakes. "What do you think about this one?" The dress was light blue with darker blue accent colors and would fall mid-thigh given her height. "I like it," Emery answered neutrally before she moved quickly to busy herself in the next row over. Jordan followed Emery. "How are you going to drag me dress shopping this early in the morning and then not even fawn over my choices like the loving girlfriend you're supposed to be?" "It would look hot on you, is that what you want to hear?" Emery gave her an even stare and moved yet again to a different row. Jordan couldn't see her anymore, but she knew Emery was staring at the different pieces in quiet concentration and, for whatever reason, working hard to ignore their conversation. "All I want to know is if my girlfriend likes the dress I picked out." She almost blushed at the statement. Saying the words made them feel strangely real, and that's not what was happening. It would be better when other people were around, and she could focus on the character built for the sake of Emery's coming out storyline. The acting would become more important when there were guests in the audience. She'd taken a few theater classes for fun a couple of years ago, and of all the people who'd paid to be there, the director had told her she had the most promise. Hell yes, she did. "Yes," Emery answered quietly, her eyes focused on a dress. Seriously, what was wrong with her today? Emery's job was to talk, and suddenly, she couldn't piece together more than a few words at a time. "Are you okay?" Jordan asked, following her to the third row in less than 5 minutes. Thankfully, it was the row against the wall and no more easy escape routes. She felt like Emery was still holding back, and it was confusing as hell given this was her idea. "I'm fine." Emery flipped errantly through a rack of dresses, none of them holding her interest for longer than a few seconds. Jordan tried a different tactic on this long road to nowhere. "Tell me more about your friends, then. What should I know and expect?" Like a switch had been flipped, Emery's posture changed. Jordan almost pushed back with the force of it. "They're all college friends." "Okay, well, I never went to college, so can you clarify what that's supposed to imply? Like keg stands and football games, or secret societies and human sacrifice rituals?" For the first time since they left the house, Emery laughed. It was a light, sweet sound, and her shoulders rounded out. "Nothing like that. God, you're dramatic." She paused for a moment. "Except the keg stand part. I was pretty good back in the day." Jordan let out a small whoosh of air. "Ms. One glass of wine and you fall asleep was queen of the keg stands?" "I was young and impressionable. I did tell you I never do anything half-assed, keg stands included." Jordan picked out a few more dresses as Emery began to relax. Maybe they'd be here more than 5 minutes, which had seemed unlikely when they'd walked in. "So, your friends?" She gently prodded. "I just don't want to be flying blind." Emery's focus was lost for a moment before she zoned into the conversation. "I haven't seen anyone since college. Rachel is getting married. A few other people from the friend group will be there as well, although I'm not sure who." "You haven't talked to any of them?" Emery bristled, and Jordan knew she'd struck a nerve. "I've been busy."
Sample complete. Ready to continue?